Welcome to the ChargePoint podcast, brought to you by FlexiCharge, your gateway to the future of EV charging. In each episode, we dive deep into the world of EV infrastructure, offering insights and perspectives from industry leaders, innovators, and the people at the forefront of deploying charging solutions and networks. Join us to explore the exciting developments that are accelerating our world towards sustainable mobility.
Welcome to a new episode of the ChargePoint podcast. Today we dive into a topic that is quickly becoming impossible to ignore in fast charging: batteries. For years, the playbook was relatively simple. Find a good location, secure the grid connection, install chargers, and start serving drivers. But that model is changing fast. Grid capacity becoming harder to access, lead times are getting longer, and the best commercial locations are not always the ones where the grid is ready. So what happens when you still want to scale high-power charging reliably, quickly, and with a great customer experience? That's exactly what we explore in today's conversation with Geert de Mil from Q8 Electric and Joost de Meester from Intercel. Q8 Electric is on an ambitious journey to build hundreds of high-power charging locations across the Benelux. And as Geert explains, batteries are no longer just a nice to have. They are becoming a structural part of the charging site architecture, helping Q8 deploy faster, reduce reliance on larger grid connections, support the grids, becoming good friends with DSOs, and deliver reliable fast charging to customers. With Joost, we look at the battery side of the equation, why co-located BESS is becoming essential for EV charging, what makes these projects technically complex, and why the real challenge is not simply placing a battery next to a charger, but making the battery, chargers, energy management system, grid connection, and customer experience work together in real time. We also discussed the first Q8 Electric and Intercel deployment and how value stacking from power boosting, peak shaving, and arbitrage, and eventually flexibility markets can turn batteries into a strategic asset for CPOs. So if you want to understand why the future of fast charging will increasingly be battery-backed, this episode is for you. Let's get started. Welcome to my two guests. Welcome, Geert. Welcome, Joost.
Hello. Thank you very much.
Thanks for taking the time. So before we get really started, Geert, can you please introduce you briefly and tell us a bit about your background that led you to the position where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Geert de Mil, and I lead the Charging Technology Systems and Insights department at Q8 Electric. So my focus is everything what is happening behind the charger. So the full site architecture hardware, the digital layer, our CPMS, monitoring and alerting software, and of course also the energy layer, what makes the fast charging reliable at scale. We're building for 2030, 500 HPC locations. So, energy management is very important and it's key for everything we want to do. So, that's it.
And what led you to the position? How do you take this position? What did you do before?
I was at Q8. I rolled into the Q8 Electric position because at the beginning it was an alternative fuels position. So and then we rolled into electric. So I was at Q8 at the very start of it, the position, let's say behind the chargers came up when we start seeing that plugging into a charger into the grid is not what is happening anymore. That doesn't work. So it's always more complex, and that's how my role came into place.
All right, so you are pure Q8 from the start, or did you work at other companies or other industries before? Just curious for the audience to share.
I was a lot of my professional life in the fuel industry.
Yes.
Before Q8 as well. I'm an engineer from background, electromechanical engineer. Did also some commercial work and some business development within Q8 and outside Q8. And that's how I rolled into the in the electric and sustainability.
As an electromechanical engineer, I mean, you're coming home to electricity, right? I guess it makes sense, yeah. So
indeed.
Great, yeah. And briefly also, so over to you, Joost. So so what's your background? What's your origin story that led you to the position where you are today?
Yeah, opposed to Geert, I have a non-technical background.
Yes, interesting.
I have a sales and business development career. Worked at Ahold, Pepsi, and Starbucks. Mm-hmm. And prior to my role here at Intercel, I was working at Tesla. And also there I was commercially responsible for charging, mm-hmm. fast and slow charging. And started a program to sell the superchargers as a white label proposition to customers who wanted the hardware, the knowledge, the technology, and the infrastructure, but not the brand. And that's how I initially also got in contact with Geert. I moved over from a couple of American companies to a Dutch company. Mm-hmm. I wanted to have a broader responsibility and be in this energy part, still being part of the energy transition. And I'm now commercially responsible for Intercel for part of the business. Mm-hmm. And I reached out to Geert again, now not for charging hardware, but for batteries.
Great. And maybe before we move forward, also just a few words. So in short, what makes Intercel's battery unique or strong on the market?
Well, do you have an hour?
No, you have a few minutes. Exactly, I told you. So please, I'd like to hear it.
What I think the sweet spot of our BESS systems, or the energy storage systems, are the fact that what we do, we assemble them here in Europe. So everything what makes it smart, mm-hmm. And where information sensitive components come into play, it's up to European standards, right? So we're not a wholesaler who just imports cabinets from China or Asia and just distribute them throughout Europe. We really assemble them here so that we can do everything according to highest standards in GDPR and all the other certifications, which makes us, as a European player, something special.
Makes sense. Absolutely, yeah. Great, yeah. And I hope next time I'm visiting the region, I'd love to come to your office, which I heard is an old facility. And
yeah, it's brand new. We opened it a year ago, and it also makes us able to distribute them here out of Haarlem, which is close to Amsterdam. And we also have a service department here. So selling hardware is one, right? But being able to provide a full package, which contains out of both selling the hardware, but also the after-sales service and installation, is something which is what we do at our core.
Great, absolutely. Well, thanks for that introduction. So, let's move on to the heart of the story, right? Geert, when so maybe you mentioned it briefly, but when did you introduce Q8 Electric?
It would be around 2020. Okay. I'd say.
And what was the intent of creating Q8 Electric? Why did you need to create Q8 Electric?
Well, because we're a mobility player at Q8, and we want to do that sustainable. So it needed to be part of our product portfolio. So if we broaden our energy service to electric, is just a natural step into transition to more sustainable Europe, sustainable world. So that's how Q8 Electric was born.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So now let's move on to the moment where maybe the breaking moment. So when did you start to realize that the old model, so having just a grid available, you put chargers, you open, was no longer working? What was the trigger that occurred to start to explore this new approach?
Yeah, well, at Q8 we weren't a front runner in electric for sure. So indeed we took a slower start, but now we're like scaling towards 500 HPC sites in the Benelux. Well, that does mean something, and that's where it really happened. The breaking point was the grid and the grid capacity, grid connection lead times. we always ran into the same wall. So that was a breaking point. Grid and chargers, you don't plug them in anymore. And,
exactly.
There needs to be something in between. And also finding a right location is to build is a commercially good location. And commercially good location doesn't have often not the right grid connection. So to avoid leaving out some commercial sites because of the grid constraints, we needed to find solutions. So that was really the break point.
The break point. And just to maybe also make it precise for the audience and also for my own sake. So are you also deploying sites outside of the gas station locations?
Yes, we are. We are looking at greenfields, so commercially right locations for charging, because often they can be different from our historical fuel sites. We're looking at passage sites, we call them. So those are these high frequency fast charging sites where everybody is just passing by but needs to charge. Mixed locations and then also some destination locations. Destination is maybe a site where somebody is a little bit longer but also needs a form of fast charging, and also that is a very important one. And to be fair, that's also the most of those locations, those site owners are very worried about, is my location okay? And yes, your location is okay, we could do something there. And then we won't have the power. And that's where we come in with these solutions that we have right now. We can bring a solution, and for the DSO, the grid owner, and for the location owner, and for Q8, we can make fast charging happening for our customers.
Before we continue with the show, here's a quick recommendation. If today's topic of battery-backed charging resonates with you, make sure to check out our webinar, The Power of Co-located Batteries, Unlocking the Full Revenue Potential. We explore how CPOs can turn batteries from a grid support tool into a strategic asset, combining power boosting, peak shaving arbitrage, and flexibility markets. Because the real value of BESS is not just doing one thing really well, it is stacking use cases intelligently. You'll find the webinar on the FlexCharge website, on the resources, and the link in the show notes. Now let's get back to the show. So, Joost, when did you then start to work with Q8 Electric? Can you also take us a bit back, how it started?
Well, how it started is what I also briefly touched upon during the introduction, is that during my time at Tesla, I was also reaching out to fuel companies, CPOs. I think everybody who wanted to have some form of charging, but didn't want to have the Tesla brand, I reached out to them, and also then got in contact with Geert. And back at the time, I think it was too early. There was just the momentum was not there, and there was also the moment that I left Tesla and I joined Intercel, and I reached out again, because if there is a charging desire, I also understood that somewhere down the line there would also be some form or need for a battery in order to cater to the charging
quality and the experience.
Quality they wanted to have.
Yeah. I guess that Tesla was early, so they didn't need to have this reinforcement because the grid was all for them, right? Because they were an early adopter. No?
Well, I think that to a certain extent is right. I think, but in general, not only for Q8 Electric, but for everybody, the initial locations which were opened were at the locations where there was enough customer demand to justify a charging location. But on the other hand, there was also enough grid capacity. So that crossroad is somewhere. What you're going to get now is that there is a demand for charging infrastructure, but that there's not enough grid capacity. And I think that's where the momentum is now, and that's the reason why we got to a partnership together to make that happen.
Yeah. So if you had to place a moment in time, so when was it clearly that batteries are no longer optional in fast charging? Is that recently?
I already knew that for quite some time. I think Geert as well, but I think that the agreement is quite recent, and I think that it's going so quickly. Mm-hmm. I think that in 12 to 18 months, a lot of companies were still, seeing somewhere down the line the necessity of batteries, and I think that now companies are in 12 to 18 months coming back and saying, can we open up different conversations because we just need it now, because it's not only charging, right? It's everything which needs electricity is connected to the grid, right? So we are just one type of business, but it's highly volatile, which makes it so important that the battery is there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, Geert, from your perspective and QS perspective, so what did BESS unlock concretely? When you realize this is what we need, is it faster rollout? Is it grid upgrades? Better customer experience? Tell us.
Customer experience for sure, because we want to bring a reliable charge to our customer, and predictable and fast. So to do that well, you really need those batteries. Intercel really came in the right place, in the right spot, because without the batteries you can't buffer those peaks, and you're not the best friend of the DSOs when you just always pull those big peaks in the grid. So for us, batteries are not nice to have anymore. It's just structural. It's a reality. Now we have EMS from FlexiCharge and a BESS from Intercel, and it's really necessary to make that work, to integrate that in our energy system, because this first rollout of those batteries and EMS, like we do it now, is a real necessity to make our deployment of fast charging sites in the Benelux happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So for the second part, I want to tell also, because it's very important for DSOs as well. It's not only for our customer, but at the other hand, we're plugging into the grid, and to be a reliable partner on the grid, it's also a necessity, because those spikes on the grid is really not, also for society, a very big cost. So it's also for us a way to be a responsible partner, and for our customers and for the landlord, but also for the grid owners.
For the grid operator.
I think also in general, I think that there's especially for consumers, right? We are in the middle of the business of electrification, electricity, but there are a lot of companies who are closely connected to that, and even consumers who just don't really understand the dynamics and the fundamental principle of how a central grid works in a country, right? And that that demand and supply need to be matched exactly on any point given of time, and that the grid itself cannot contain electricity, right? Electricity exists by the fact that it flows, right? And so you just look at it as the analogy of a river, and if you stop it, then it overflows, and if you make it too wide, then the bed gets dry, and that principle needs to be managed by so many different companies and institutions which are not talking to each other about who is using what kind of electricity. It's so complex that batteries are just buffers in order to facilitate that in a certain manner. But so education is also, I think, a good thing for this podcast, to educate people a bit more about how complex it is, right? It's not selling a can of Coke or a bag of chips.
No, it's not. Absolutely not, yeah. So if we look at the project as it proceeded, so what turned out to be harder than expected, Geert, if you think back?
Good question. Good question. What was really hard? Well, getting a charger into the grid and making it work with the CPMS is point number one, and that works. And if you add some complexities, yes, that works as well. But bringing the new infrastructure that is needed onto a site, and that is the EMS, that is smart metering, that is the chargers, of course, but also the batteries. Well, that's when it, and that all in real time, that's when it's very complex. And that's what we did, maybe underestimate a bit how to make that work, that orchestration of energy. Like you say, Joost, you can't overflow. You need to do it in a very thoughtful way, and be not the uncontrolled customer of the grid, but really a predictable party and a predictable player.
Yeah.
The getting our systems really integrated into each other was the biggest work.
Yeah. And I know there's been a lot of meetings between the different parties, to make that happen over the course of the many months, And maybe a question to you, Joost. So from this type of project, deploying BESS, co-located BESS on EV charging sites, so what would you say goes typically wrong or can go wrong in such projects? Is it about the sizing of the battery, the control logic, the expectation versus reality?
So to put it in perspective, if you put a battery on a farm which has some solar panels on its roof, and at night and there is a chiller there and some form of constant load of energy, and the grid is there, and the battery is there, and the battery takes over, right? And the freezer needs to be chilled by the battery versus the grid. There's a couple of milliseconds between it, right? And it takes over, but then that's fine, because then the temperature of the cooling of this freezer is being impacted, right? So it's not that delicate. When it comes to charging, there's a moment in time that there is a high power hypercharger is charging the car, and then somewhere down the line during the charging session, the car says stop because it's full, or the customer says I've had enough, I need to go, and then he presses the stop button, and then immediately that power which is flowing needs to stop. It cannot go back in the grid, because then, to Geert's point, you're disturbing the grid. So then it needs to be absorbed by the battery. But the protocol of the car, the protocol of the battery, and the grid, and the EMS, they all need to understand what needs to be done by when.
Yeah.
And the speed of that, the response times are absolutely crucial. And that is, I think, what is the most difficult part to manage. Right? A battery is a battery. Yeah. Which is like a pen light which you put in a torch or in a radio, right? That's not that special. It's the digital and the software part around it.
Yeah, and the complexity of the case, as you say, right? A farm, there's a clear case, the sun shines, you fill up the battery, then it starts to feed.
Predictable.
Exactly, right? Really predictable. Here, there's a lot of, it's not.
And it doesn't come in. It doesn't come in. If a second there is it switches from one to the other, that's all fine, right? But this is really a millisecond thing, which is very crucial. So that sensitivity and combined with reliability is crucial.
Yeah, of course, the bar is high in terms of quality of service, as you always say, Geert. So,
and we cracked the code, I think, right?
Yeah. And what about just in the sizing? Was it an easy part of the exercise, like finding the right size for the site? Geert, what do you say? Was it an easy exercise?
Well, no, in this partnership with Intercel, we learned how to size. Together, we also stepped in simulation tool to really balance the kilowatt hours you buffer with the situation and see or predict when we need to expand. Sizing on itself wasn't that difficult. It's very important to do so, of course. Batteries cost money, and it's not there. It's not the moment to invest more in kilowatt hours you don't need. But it is something that was manageable. Yeah. It's to step into what was more difficult, for instance, again, was restart the site. There's a site and there's just a power drop, something else, and those systems drop out, and then you really auto-start the whole site. And the chargers itself, they can do that, but now you have the whole system that needs to restart. And again, like Joost says, it's a matter of seconds and milliseconds to do that in the right order. So we're all on top of that, and I think with FlexiCharge, who provides us an EMS that really can react on that short notice, together with the Intercel industry-grade batteries. I think for us, it's handy to have those partners because at the end, quality of service for our customers is the North Star. Yeah, these are the pieces that fill the puzzle.
Yeah, and again, there's no plug-and-play solution out there on the market where anybody can guarantee you this is the setup, just go plug, you go. No, it's as you said yourself, I think we use that expression, you building the plane as you fly it, right? Because it's the opening. Yeah. Can you give us an idea just of the sizing, typical ratio between the batteries and the number of chargers on a site? I don't know, like the Harderwijk or another site, just for the audience and for myself.
Certainly. We always put 4 charge points. That's the minimum, the bare minimum. That goes up to 4, from 4 to 12, 16 charge points, all HPC. But let's start with the grid and just maybe as a form of example, for locations where we in the past would ask 1000 kVA, we can now ask just 250 kVA.
Oh, wow.
And that together with batteries and the EMS, that means that it's a lower cost, it's a lower OPEX, of course, as well, but for the same amount of plugs that at a certain moment we want to install, well, we can do that with a lot less peak power from the grid, and that's what makes it all
and what would be the size of the battery in this case, typically?
In that case, it would be 1,000 kilowatt hours, something like that. 3 to 4 modules in the Intercel, 300 kilowatt hour Intercel batteries modules.
Great. Yeah. So if we talk a bit about more numbers, which is something I really love, and financial, maybe a bit, if you are ready. So where, maybe over to you, Joost. So where does, according to you, right, do you see the real value of the BESS come from today, from your perspective and your understanding of EV charging? What would you say it's providing in terms of financial value to a company like Geert Electric?
Well, I think the most sustainable aspect of using batteries in order to optimize the amount of sessions in order for customers on any given charging site, right? Because if you look at the electrification and the energy transition, the electric vehicle is there to stay. There's an ever-growing amount of cars coming to the market. You know, there are some conversations about what do you call it, the deadline of 2030 being moved up to 2035. And Geert might even know more about that in detail from a car perspective. But it's not a question about if, but it's more when the transition is even going to accelerate, right? And you see that with the geopolitical unrest at the moment, that the second-hand electrical vehicles are increasing in the Netherlands. You see an immediate effect. That's the most sustainable, I think, element which batteries can cater to, right? If you look at batteries, we're also in conversation with companies who have charging infrastructure or locations for land for charging infrastructure, but it's not totally utilized yet. They could cater to 12, but they only use 6 because there's not enough charging sessions yet, and they want to use the rest of the capacity to do arbitrage or energy trading. Right? That is, however, the customer would like to use it. But in the end, I think that using it for what it's primarily installed for is the best suitable solution.
Okay, yeah. Interesting, yeah. And you, Geert, so convincing your management to invest in a setup which includes the BESS, what matters the most for Geert Electric? Is it the return on investment? Is it the uptime or the QoS, quality of service? How does it rank in the discussions?
It all starts with our customer. We're a customer-centric company, of course, customer-facing. So for us, the quality of service. And at the same level, because it is the same. It's predictability and uptime. So you need all that. So your customer will come back. He knows it's going to be a reliable charge, and from that, I think derives then the return on investment, because you can step in with a lower grid connection, which is a lower non-commodity cost. It's easier to build than you don't have to wait that long for an expensive grid connection. So altogether, that is also a return on investment. And I needed to tell the whole story, of course, with all the advantages and disadvantages, because in the beginning it's a bigger capex, so a bigger investment cost, that is for sure. So indeed, we needed to look at that with management and take a decision that if we want to roll out on the pace we want to roll out and be in the Benelux with the full coverage of HPC sites, then you really need to install batteries, because otherwise you just can't keep up with the pace, because the grid can't.
Yeah.
So that was the most important one.
Yeah. That was the most important, yeah. And maybe take a few minutes on what's next, very next. So the parts which you just mentioned, arbitrage, right? So behind the meter, optimizing the cost of electricity buying, and then filling up when it's cheap, selling it when it's expensive. What about that? And the outside the meter, so the flexibility markets. I know you have a collaboration with Uso, which we can talk maybe another time about. But just where are we on this? How complex it is, and what's the vision to maximize, I guess, the business case, right?
It is, and to maximize as well also the amount of cycles we can do with the batteries, of course. So there will always be the buffer to support the boost charge. That is always first. So the charge needs to be predictable and fast, and with the rest of the buffering in the battery, that in some moments of the day is really extra buffer. Well, that is what we can use for arbitrage. So then we will maybe boost more from the battery, so we can empty the battery in the hours it's cheaper. So we can that we can load the battery in the hours it gets cheaper. That's what you call time of use, Christophe. And indeed, the balancing of the grid. Well, there's something to say there, but for us, the last step. It's not in our. To be honest, for the moment, it's not taken into account for our return on investment. It will, and we're well aware of it, but it's not for now. So, it's not the decision why we took batteries on our site.
So it can come as a thick icing on the cake, as it's going to be a reality, right? Yeah. Interesting, absolutely.
Or the cherry, maybe a bit healthier.
Exactly. Yeah. The big fat cherry on the cake, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we now let's play a bit the crystal ball. Always exercise. I love it to finish the episode today. Maybe starting with you, Joost. So what's going to happen within BESS? We can take a starting point in your roadmap, Intercel, but how do you see the BESS market, of course, especially in relationship with EV charging, evolve in the next 3 to 5 years? A couple of insights or insights.
Well, I think that in general, we are absolutely convinced that the transition will continue, right? Sun and wind is everywhere, so that we're less reliant on other parts of the world. The downside of renewable energy is that you need to store it somewhere, right? So from that perspective, batteries are absolutely relevant in order to make that fly. From an EV charging perspective, I think that what we're trying to do is help customers, so CPOs, charge point operators, pure players who do nothing else, but also companies who have that as a service, like supermarket chains, etc. Right, all these bigger chains we're trying to get in touch with, and with many we're already in contact, to help them out to really be as efficiently as possible, but also to make sure that not only our batteries are working properly with the right EMS platforms, because what we just talked about, the sensitivity and response times are so crucial, but also upstream to the manufacturers, the OEMs of charging hardware. Because if we can make sure that our batteries are perfectly working with the charging hardware, you already have a big chunk of the technology being integrated, as you call a certified stack, so that if a company comes and that they then can choose, and if they can choose charging hardware A and our battery, they already know that it works. Because you just still see that a lot of companies have complexity and difficulty to make all these different fragments and components work as an integrated part with each other. Helping there together with service, I think in 5 years a lot more charging sites will open, and hopefully also with the help of us and also with Q8 Electric.
Yeah. And what about the depot logistics business? How do you see that in the next 5 years in the Benelux?
I think there is a big opportunity there. If you look at depot/truck charging, it absolutely goes beyond the Benelux. There are already companies who are focusing on truck charging. A lot of modifications need to happen, but there's also still the decision needs to be made. Is it easier and better and more efficient to charge while loading and unloading your truck, or do you need to do it when the truck driver needs to do his mandatory stop of a couple of hours? Do you need to charge then? Where, etc. So there's still a lot of uncertainty. A lot of companies are working with that, and we have the hardware to facilitate that. But the question is how to integrate that as well. So yes, it is. And I think that's an integrated part of the energy transition.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there will be no depot logistics without the batteries. That's for sure. Yeah, no. I agree. Yeah, and from your perspective, so Geert, your crystal ball. So concretely, where is Q8 Electric in 3 to 5 years? How does the network look? How does the station set up? The business cases, so to speak, or the revenues? What's your vision?
Well, let me come back on the truck thing, because that was very interesting. Indeed, depot charging for sure, but also trucks will need to fast charge during their trip on the public road. And of course, we're looking at those solutions as well. Again, with batteries, because the peaks are higher, kilowatts are higher. So you also need those batteries as well there. And in fact, we're going to install one of our first truck charging spots in Randst, Belgium. We're going to build there a new highway site, of course with HPC charging as well for trucks. So that will be a first one for us, where the combination will be the grid plus batteries and then megawatt charging for trucks. So just exciting. As a side note, that we're also looking at that. We have also a truck division for Europe, so it's something that fits into their strategy as well.
Logically, yeah. So, and the vision for the HPC network that you're working on in 3 to 5 years, how does it look?
Well, we alluded on it already. It's still the goal to have 500 sites in the Benelux region. So really covering the three countries. The crystal ball is that we will grow faster than the grid will. So again, I think we need to build something that is really reliable, that the DSO sees us as a partner and not an uncontrolled load that is very expensive. And on top of that, I prefer really that for society as well, that you have like those energy hubs for fast charging, where public energy hubs where you can really fast charge your car, and that those reinforcements, the extra money is indeed invested in that kind of solutions, instead of reinforcing in every street, every house, to make charging happening there. Because for me it's a conversation that we should start, maybe also in another episode, Christophe. But it's also something very interesting. If you only have one wallet to spend money, then where are you going to put the money?
Very much.
So for society, the cost is maybe also very, very high at the other side.
Yeah. It is a very hot topic also here in Denmark, where we're based. The grid is also starting to really feel the pressure. And then it's like we're talking billions and billions of investment to reinforce. Where do you reinforce? What makes sense? Because, we have one wallet and absolutely another episode. Absolutely. Well, on that note, I think we'll close it here. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. It was super interesting and we could continue. We'll continue probably in the future. So wishing you a great afternoon and thanks again for coming.
Thank you very much,
Christophe, and for giving us this platform. Thank you.
Thanks. You.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was a fascinating conversation with Geert from Q8 Electric and Joost from Intercel. And I think the key takeaway is pretty clear. Batteries are no longer a side topic in fast charging. They are becoming part of the core infrastructure. What stood out to me is that the challenge is not only about adding more chargers, it is about making the whole energy system work. The grid connection, the chargers, the battery, the EMS, and the customer experience. For Q8 Electric, this is very concrete. They are scaling towards hundreds of high-power charging stations across the Benelux, and the grid cannot always keep up with that ambition. By using batteries, they can reduce the need for very large grid connections, unlock commercially attractive locations, which they already have, and still deliver the fast and reliable charging experience that customers expect. Another important learning is that BESS is not only about solving one problem. Yes, it helps with limited grid capacity. Yes, it enables power boosting. Yes, it can reduce peaks and improve the operational profile of a site. But the real value comes when all these use cases are combined intelligently. That is where value stacking becomes essential. A battery should not sit there only doing one thing. It should support charging when drivers need power, help smooth the load on the grid, reduce energy costs when possible, and later potentially participate in flexibility markets. But as Geert rightly pointed out, the customer experience comes first. The battery is there to enable better charging, not to compromise it. And Joost brought an important perspective from the battery side. The hardware matters, but the real complexity is in the integration and the software. In EV charging, loads can change in milliseconds. A car stops charging, another starts, the grid limit remains fixed, and the battery has to react instantly. That requires a properly orchestrated system, not just a battery cabinet next to a charger. Looking ahead, it is clear that battery-backed fast charging will become much more common. Grid constraints will not disappear overnight. On the contrary, EV adoption will continue and truck charging will create even higher power requirements. So the charging sites of the future will not just be places where energy is delivered, they will become intelligent energy hubs combining chargers, batteries, grid interaction, and optimization software, like Harmony, for example. And for CPOs, the question is shifting. It is no longer only should we install batteries, it is becoming how do we make batteries work properly, profitably, and reliably at scale. This is exactly the challenge and the opportunity this episode helped us unpack. Before you go, if you enjoy the ChargePoint podcast, don't forget to share it with your network, subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming episodes, and please give us a 5-star rating. It really helps us grow and bring more of this conversation to the industry. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode.